was one weird rule your parents had growing up that you thought was totally normal until you got older. Story 1. No one allowed in or out of the house on New Year's Day until my red-headed uncle came to visit. It's good luck if the first person in the door on New Year's is a redhead. There were 10 kids in my mom's family. Poor Uncle Bill was run ragged by 2 p.m. Story 2. Always talk to the cat in a normal voice and not in the baby talk voice people do with pets, because he will think you're stupid. He probably does, anyway. Story 3. No closed doors to bedrooms and bathrooms. Even if you were sleeping or taking a shower or taking a dump, I can't in a public restroom because though I know this will never happen, I somehow am afraid of someone getting mad at me for closing the stall door. Story 4. Not being able to use the couch cushions, pillows and blankets because those were only to decorate when we had guests over. Ends up my mom has untreated OCD and only told us years later it explains a lot of her behavior. Story 5. My mom always told me growing up that I could wear any color nail polish I wanted, except for red, because, and I quote, it's a color that hookers wear, so bizarre. Story 6. We were not allowed to invite a friend over for a sleepover 2 times in a row. They had to host first before we could invite them again. Looking back, I think this was my mom's way of avoiding sleepovers. Story 7. The interrupt rule. If we wanted to talk to our parents but they were talking to someone else, we would place our hand on their arm. They would acknowledge it by placing their hand on ours, and then we would keep our hands there until they turned to ask us what we needed. I did it to a teacher, and he'll never forget how confused and frankly a little freaked out she looked seeing a child just touching her arm and staring at her while she was talking to another teacher. Story 8. If I had a friend over, went to a friend's house, went to the mall with a friend or even went outside and played with any other kids one weekend, I better not even ask to do anything the following weekend. Many weekends I spent alone in my room. I was a straight A kid too, and at 17, I had a 9 p.m. curfew on Saturday nights. Story 9. When our father got home from work, would be sent to our rooms, sometimes until the time he left the next morning. He'd get home and not want to interact with us, so would be sent off across the house, checked on occasionally, spanked or yelled at if we got too loud. Luckily I had my older brother, but it got lonely. And it was better than being around him because he was mean and aggressive. He once left black and blue belt stripes across my brother's back, because he was caught jumping on the bed again. When I was 2 or 3 he put me in timeout, facing the corner, then he fell asleep and hours later I wandered off to go play. He woke up and got angry I left, so he busted into my room, grabbed me by the ankle and lifted me upside down to administer a thankfully brief beating. When he'd call us out of our room, he'd scream our names and we were so scared he was going to yell at us or hit us, so the rule was when dad gets home go to your room. Story 10. I couldn't listen to modern music BC, it was all inappropriate. It turns out my parents, mainly my mom, was just low-key racist. She forced us to listen to her music which was all about and drugs, but all done by white people. Story 11. Soft drinks are adult drinks. Imagine my horror when I went to a birthday party in kindergarten and the mom started to serve soft drinks to us 5-year-olds. Being the rule follower that I was, I said that I wasn't allowed to drink it because it was an adult drink. The mom convinced me that my parents would be okay if I had a glass. I remember being very upset with my parents after the party because I was so embarrassed. Story 12. I have 2 I haven't seen. Mention 1. You must wake up at 6 a.m. regardless of day, and would be punished if you failed. I often did fail as I had undiagnosed ADHD at the time, and it led to frequent arguments. They said it was to prepare me for the adult world. I now don't wake up even close to that early for my actual adult job too. I was not allowed to interact with males, as they were worried about me getting into a relationship while I was still in school. As a result, my closest relationships growing up were with other women. And now I am gay. Story 13. My dad used to tell us that we weren't allowed to touch the painted parts of the car because it would mess it up, only touch the handles. This was so completely ingrained in me that even as an adult I thought that car paint was somehow easily ruined. It wasn't until working in the automotive industry that I realized that, in fact, it's quite durable and, made to be on the road. Story 14. My parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth. Before we got in bed, if they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth, they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real, we would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them, but by the time we got to be 13, we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. Story 15. When we were little and the Avon lady would come knocking on our door, my mom would tell us to be very quiet and to not make a noise because it's the mean Avon lady and she has a gun. Oh, we totally believed her, and it wasn't until I was in the 8th grade that we moved, and my little sister's friend's dad would sell Avon at swap meets. We asked if he had a gun, and her friend looked so confused. Oh, we figured then that my mom was just telling us a story to make sure we were quiet so she didn't have to open the door and deal with the Avon lady. It is still one of the silliest memories of my childhood, and up until my mom passed away 4 years ago, we would give her such a hard time for it. Her response was always, well, it got you to be quiet, and she always went away. I don't know if it's really a rule, but maybe it was. We were never to answer the door to those women. I miss my mom so much. Edit spelling. Story 16. If mom's bedroom door is closed, do not knock, do not open. If one of us has a severed arm, ask yourself, do you really need to knock on her door? Maybe it wasn't a rule per se, but we knew the rule. Story 17. We weren't really allowed to lock the bathroom door. It wasn't a rule, we only had one bathroom, there were 5 of us. It was fairly rare to be able to bathe or shower without someone else needing to use the bathroom. In the mornings, my sister would be doing her hair in front of the sink, while someone was in the shower, and then someone else would come in to use the toilet or grab laundry. We left it all in a pile on the floor. The bathroom was big enough for all of this. Also, my mom was a naked mom, and I think she hated folding laundry. We had clean clothes, but they were all in a huge laundry basket in the pantry, which was at the other end of the house from the bathroom and bedrooms, so we all made partially clothed dashes down the hall, through the kitchen to the pantry to find clothes. Shockingly, I have no trouble using the toilet in front of anyone and talking to them at the same time or vice versa. It has been commented on positively. In my last few relationships, it also came in very handy having kids because they seem to know I sat down and barge in to ask me something. I am also really comfortable naked, but no one I've dated has complained about that one, either. Story 18 had to call every adult by their last name Mr. and Mrs. even when they wanted to be called by their first name, wanting me to call someone by their last name when they were 28 years old and I was 12, and it went against their wishes to be called Sam blows my mind and undermines the other adults. Story 19 The current weird rule here is no food in the living room. Our kids sit in the foyer with their snack food. Adult friends follow the rules too until the kids go to bed. Saves me from digging crumbs out of the couch, and it's way easier mopping spills on tile than from carpet. I remember the first time I ate in the living room as a kid. It was liberating. Story 20 We couldn't talk while at the dinner table. That's why me and my siblings are fast eaters 5 minutes or less. It has definitely messed with my ability to sense if I'm full. I can binge eat like no one else in my life. My husband can finish 34 of his food and be full, and I can eat mine and finish his plate and the rest of the sides. It's terrible. Story 21 Had to drink 2 full glasses of milk before being allowed 1 cup of Diet Coke. The room at the top of the stairs with the short door was the monster room, and I wasn't allowed to open the door. It was just a storage closet. There wasn't even anything interesting inside. Story 22 We weren't necessarily allowed to get hurt. At least I wasn't. My dad deemed it unsightly and unladylike at first. I liked to climb trees and such as a kid, and he noticed I had a scab on my arm when I was in the 5th grade. Snatched me up by my arm and yelled at me telling me it made me ugly and no boy would ever love or want to be with me if I had a bunch of scars. Then got mad at me when I said I'd hope a boy would not want to be with me over some scars on my skin. That's shallow. Turns out he was right, but it wasn't about physical scars. Nobody wants to be with someone covered in the emotional scars he left. Also the same man who told me I was fat that same summer and wouldn't allow me to eat past 5 p.m. because I get fat and nobody likes fat women. I also had to ask permission for food and or eat within his restricted times and regulations until I was like 17. If I ate outside of his restrictions, he tore me a new one. I have a very complicated relationship with food and my body now. There's plenty more, but yeah, my dad sucked. Story 23 One of my cousin's parents had this thing called grown-up candy, which was basically candy that they drilled into their heads since they were young. Was only for grown-ups. It was the parents' favorite candy too. LMAO, kind of like alcohol. She was 16 when she figured out almond joys were consumable for children. Story 24 You have to say hello to the plants every morning, greet the houseplants, respect the greenery, spend time there. Well, I love that now. I'm gonna follow it always. Story 25 Can only wear jeans once a week. Cannot change at school by hiding jeans in your backpack. Mom will come and check and make you change. No black eyeliner. You'll be coming if you wear black eyeliner. No crying in public. You'll be an embarrassment to the family. Story 26 If there was an event after school or a birthday party or anything and it was on a day they worked, it was an automatic no because they were at work. If it was on a day they had off, it was a no because they wanted to enjoy their day off. If I offered to be dropped off or picked up by a friend's parents or walk, it was a no because there could be serial killers waiting to kidnap me. My day was wake up, go to school, come home, eat dinner, go to bed, all day every day. I had a really lonely childhood. Once people figured out I'd always say no to invites. Story 27 Shut up was a swear word in our house. If we asked our parents if our friends could hang out in front of said friend, answer was immediately no. I had to ask to have a sleepover with a friend 7 days in advance. Anything less than that was immediately no. Doors were locked at 8:30 p.m. If we tried to come home after that, it was sleeping on the porch. We had a box on the porch that had pillows and blankets for this reason. Was not allowed to sleep in later than 9:15 a.m. on the weekends. Story 28 If we were ever trying to promise we were telling the truth and said I swear, my mom would say don't swear. It drove me crazy. That's not what they mean when people say swearing is bad. Her first language is English too, so to this day I don't get it, but she was weirdly particular about a lot of stuff. Story 29 Our dogs were allowed on the couch, but we weren't until my dad moved out when I was almost 16. Lots of other crazy too OFC, but that one is kinda funny. Story 30 If I thought it was normal in the sense of being common, but I thought it was acceptable, not being allowed to use the bathroom after a certain time in the morning because dad wanted to reserve it for himself. Story 31 We were not allowed to use the stove, microwave, can openers or knives. My parents also only cooked meals maybe 6 times a year. That left behind a really weird and complicated relationship with food. Story 32 No growing out fingernails. My dad used to use his knee to hold my head on the floor while he twisted my hands behind my back so he could cut my fingernails as absolutely short as possible. Story 33. Painkillers and medication are only allowed as an absolute last resort. I had no idea painkillers and over-the-counter medication were used so often by other families, or that people regularly went to the doctors. Growing up in my family, things had to be incredibly dire before you could get things like medication or painkillers. Sick with a stomach bug or cold, do you need to go to the hospital? No, then get your lazy up, no medication. Severed a ligament in your knee which you very much should go to the hospital for, walk it off, no painkillers. Story 34. We were not allowed to eat the candies on the Christmas tree until the priest came to bless the house and the tree, which usually happened after New Year, so we would have to look at all the candy for 1 to 2 weeks, but couldn't eat them. I remember one year we had pretty good stuff up there on the Christmas tree, like chocolate Santas, full-size chocolate bars, even Coca-Cola cans. We never had brand cola in the usual day-to-day life. It was agonizing. Story 35. Comparing your children. My sister had straight A's, and I struggled. Since I struggled, I was considered the dumb sister by teachers and by my family. That behavior never subsided, and I felt like I wasn't ever enough. My parents thought I was pretending not to be smart and they'd punish me for it. Lost my phone, got spanked and got yelled at for being stupid. It made me feel not enough in every way. I got transferred to a smaller school with smaller class sizes. It helped so much. They didn't know I had a sister, so I wasn't getting comparisons from teachers anymore. Teachers took additional time to explain things, and when I struggled they listened. This one teacher I had really noticed I was struggling and had me stay after class. I ended up telling him how my parents had this expectation because of my sister. My dad picked me up that day, and my teacher talked to him without me there. After that day, my dad started to understand and listen to me. What that teacher said, but it really made a huge difference. Story 36. I was not allowed to sit in the aisle seat at the movies cause someone might stab me with a drug needle. As an older person, really, as if someone would share their drugs. Story 37. We couldn't flush at night, so in the morning there would be loads of in the toilet. This honestly felt normal, but I now realize how weird that is. My parents said that we had to have either an acceptance letter from a college or a leave date for boot camp the day we graduated from high school. They never said what would happen if we didn't. That wasn't a possibility. Story 38. Women and girls were not allowed to whistle. I loved whistling and am very good at it. The rule was eventually softened to no girls whistling in the house. A whistling woman and a crowing hen never will come to a very good end was the accompanying limerick. I bit back by becoming an extremely well-practiced all-state piccoloist. Story 39. Don't talk about religion. My dad is atheist and would get so mad if I talked about God or Jesus as if they were real. He would give us a talking to about how they were fake. He'd ridicule the idea of angels, heaven, or an afterlife and made it clear that we would all die and there was nothing after death. He'd laugh at my mother when she would find comfort in signs from dead relatives. I'm atheist as a result. I think I would have become one anyway, but I think it would have been nice to believe in heaven when I was 7 and grandma was dying. Story 40. Not mine, but my mom says my grandma used to make them take off all their clothes except the underwear at the corridor as soon as they got home. We suspect she had untreated OCD. Story 41. If dad was watching TV, we had to sit still in our chair. No lounging on the couch, no talking, definitely could not be on the phone. That was dad's quiet time. I learned to read in my room in order to avoid him. Story 42. No feet allowed on furniture. I like to sit cross-legged on the couch. My dad got upset every time. Years later, as an adult in my mid-20s, even bringing my wife over to my parents' place, he got mad at me for not telling my wife to keep her feet off the furniture. My wife has never sat in a seat normally in her life. She was taken aback at first. She started to put her feet on me and I sat normally, kinda minor overall. As an aside, the first thing I did when I moved out and got a couch was put my feet up on it. Story 43. This is my favorite from my friend who escaped a controlling crazy mom. Their family couldn't use beach towels when they went to water parks, the pool or the beach because they were too nice to get dirty. Couldn't use the regular shower towels because those can't go outside. They each got one small microfiber cloth to wipe with for the day. Story 44. Not a rule, but never eating anywhere where my dad couldn't have beer or wine. I was actually jealous of my friends who got to have McDonald's Happy Meals. Story 45. Not leaving your room for any reason after 8:30 p.m. The only time it was allowed was for an emergency house on fire, and there was a camera pointed directly at my room with motion detection, so they always knew exactly when I was leaving my room. They learned the hard way that if I wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom at night, I would just the bed and come crying at their door about it. So then it was changed to me being allowed to go to the bathroom, but that was it. Story 46. I was not allowed to flip coins. It had something to do with how flipping coins in public made you look like an old-timey gangster or something. This was back in the 90s too. Story 47. My parents would have to watch any movie before us. Didn't matter the rating, could have been G, and they would still have to watch it first before allowing us to watch it, and if they didn't like it, thought it was dumb or inappropriate, we didn't get to watch it. That rule lasted to about their 4th child. I'm the second oldest of 6. Story 48. Before cell phones, of course. I couldn't get phone calls to the house after 9 p.m. on weeknight. On weekends though it was extended to 1017. When asked why that specific time, I was told if I ask again weekends would also be 9. I'm 33 and I still don't have the answer. Story 49. I believe this one's pretty common. My parents said it was illegal and also horrifying dangerous to have the overhead light on in the car while driving. I was honestly shocked to find out it was all lies. I can drive just fine with the light on. I still don't understand why they made it sound so dangerous. Story 50. If you slam your door it gets taken off. And the notion that privacy is a privilege for children obviously wouldn't do that to my potential kids, but I thought at least more people would have that experience. Story 51. Not my parents, but my grandma used to watch me while my parents worked growing up. We weren't allowed to say but passed gas instead as it was rude and not ladylike. Also couldn't say pregnant and instead said expecting or gonna be a mom. Ironic because my parents didn't really care about what I said. I guess my grandma was just really strict about her phrases. Story 52. Daily checking of grades. The second, yes second, I got home from school, it would be pulled up on my dad's laptop. I'm 22 now and am still not fully recovered from the verbal abuse that came with me getting an 85 instead of an A. Now I make more money than my father did when he was in his late 30s and I don't even have a college degree. Sometimes I send him screenshots of my bank account just as a you I turned out just fine. It feels really good. Story 53. We weren't allowed any toys with guns. Mum even wouldn't buy us Lego if the set had a gun. But Star Wars was somehow okay because blasters aren't guns. Story 54. Dinner table is for intellectual conversation about world events. We had to bring a topic for discussion daily. No small talk allowed. I was not once asked about my day or anything I do. I used to love bringing opposing points of view like Hitler and Pol Pot and Stalin to annoy my parents. Story 55. Stepmom had a 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. rule. No phone calls before or after, no friends, no waking up and bugging them for anything. This includes Christmas morning. Although that did get moved to 8 a.m., we weren't allowed to leave our rooms until then. She would also listen when we would go to the bathroom to make sure we washed our hands. If she thought we didn't she would go make sure the sink was wet. Story 56. Not a rule. But my parents had me so convinced I had to eat the crust of bread because it was the most nutritious part. Was like 30 years old before I realized it's just well done bread. Story 57. You cannot bang or ding your spoon against the side. Only silently scrape it against the bottom of the bowl, or carefully stir in a teacup. When I got to an age to eat at others' houses, I was shocked at all the spoon banging going on. Story 58. I lived with my mom and her partner at the time. I wasn't allowed in the house unless my mother was home, so I'd have to wait outside after school until she got home from work, even in the cold winters. The partner would also spend hours in the bathroom every day, and if my sibling or I had to use the bathroom we had to go outside in the yard. I wasn't allowed to use Wi-Fi at home even though we had it. I wasn't allowed in certain rooms, wasn't allowed to cook or touch basically anything in the house. I moved out of there when I was 16. Story 59. 5-minute alert. 5-minute alert. You've been on the phone for 5 minutes, time to get off. Yeah, my dad only allowed everybody in the house to be on the phone for 5 minutes at a time, because the phone is a tool, not a toy. If you stayed on the phone after you were alerted, head just unplug it. Story 60. Well, I thought it was rules for everyone but turns out was just all my mum's weird superstition and wives' tales. I still get mad at her for making me believe and still worry that something bad may happen if I put new shoes on the table. Story 61. If I went out at night, I had to be home by midnight, otherwise I would be locked out and would have to find somewhere to spend the night. I was never given a house key. Story 62. We weren't allowed to pass on the stairs. If someone was coming up while we wanted to come down, we had to yield, for good luck. We also were not allowed to take off a shirt if we put it on inside out. We needed another person to do it for us, again for some luck superstition. I asked Mom when I was a teen, what if I put my shirt on wrong and I am home alone? Crickets. Story 63. No dating anyone until I'd known them for a year, and I had to talk to them every day for that year, miss a day, start over. In practice I knew it was impossible so I never even tried. In retrospect, I think they wanted to keep me from dating before I got my driver's license so they didn't have to take me places and pick me up, but because of the rule I didn't date anyone until I was in college. TBH, though I knew this was not at all normal. Story 64. I have a few but they're all kind of under the same umbrella of being what my family considered proper. Only classical music was allowed. I didn't mind it, because classical music is anyway. This one kind of stuck. It's still most of what I listened to. TV was only news or documentaries. I was home alone a lot so I would sometimes sneak some other things in, so I knew some cartoons kids my age watched. Video games were fine, go figure. Movies were all pretty much right out. This one stuck too. I watch like one movie every 5 or 6 years. I watch some TV series, but movies are very rare. Story 65. Curse words were weird, fine to use words. Bad words. Dickhead. I think they used reverse psychology because I've never really sworn or used curse words outside of saying it or all. Also, instead of calling people an absolute and utter moron I call them a monkey. We couldn't say sucks. Mom still doesn't like us saying it. Story 66. I started working at 16 and only got 10 of my paycheck until I was 25. Parents took the rest of the money for themselves. Then I was expected to have enough money to buy my own car. Story 67. If your room wasn't military levels of clean, the bedroom door bed theme would be removed. Sleeping on a mattress on the floor wasn't too bad, but getting changed was really a chore as a teenage girl, especially because my brother would always have friends over. Story 68. In the summer, my parents would lock my brother and I out of the house bright and early on Saturday mornings, and we weren't allowed to come home until dinner time. Story 69. We were not permitted to eat or drink except water from the sink except what was served to us at mealtimes. My sister and I weren't allowed to open the refrigerator or pantry. I didn't realize other kids didn't have these rules until I was at least 12. Story 70 No marbles or bouncy or small spherical objects of any kind. I thought this rule was because my brother inhaled the ammunition of his homemade blowguns. The first time it was one of those individually wrapped cinnamon jawbreakers you get at Halloween. The second time it was a pipe cleaner he had wadded up and coiled into a ball. He's probably the only person in the world who's inhaled a pipe cleaner whole. Nope, turns out that regular old naked doctor playing pretend just wasn't adventurous enough for him. Instead, he and one of our neighbor girls decided to play their own version of Hungry Hungry Hippos. Head shove all of the marbles in the game into her Hungry Hungry Hippo and then shed jump up and down to get them back out. Story 71 My parents had this rule that we weren't allowed to shower during a thunderstorm. Like, if it started raining and there was lightning anywhere in the area, they'd make us get out of the shower immediately. No matter what, I thought this was totally normal and just a safety thing everyone followed. It wasn't until I mentioned it casually in college that people looked at me like I was insane. Turns out, it's a thing, but definitely not a widely enforced household rule. Now I can't hear thunder without instinctively checking if anyone's in the bathroom. Story 72 Not weird per se but more of a realization. Growing up on Sunday mornings we were not allowed to watch TV, play Nintendo or even read the funnies before church. My parents said we wasted too much time, so we'd get all dressed up for church and sit and wait to leave in silence. When I was 18 my brother 19 and I moved out to an apartment by our college. I woke up on a Sunday morning and went to the living room to see him playing PS2. I was like, dude, you can't play before church. And then it hit me, I could finally do what I wanted. When I wanted, it was like a revelation. What's funny is that we didn't even go to church that Sunday, or for the next few months, just muscle memory. Story 73 This one isn't all that bad, but I wasn't allowed to watch most MA-17 or R-rated shows even at 17, I mostly just snuck around and watched them on illegal movie sites LMFAO. Story 74 When I was like 8 I slammed my door and got it taken off the hinges for a good while. My youngest brother is older now than I was then and slams his door almost daily. Also in 5th grade since I wouldn't get up for school they had already tried blasting loud annoying music. My dad had to make sure I got dressed so I would get dressed under a blanket on my bunk bed every morning. Story 75 Making meat helmets, luge lessons, spending summers in Rangoon and being placed in a burlap bag and beaten with reeds after having been insolent was not normal. Story 76 No drink or salt and pepper at the table during dinner. It would be insulting to the cook mom if you season the food, and it would be rude to wash the food down with liquid. Story 77 I had to wait for the owner of the house I was visiting to ask if I was hungry or thirsty. I wasn't allowed to ask myself. Children are seen and not heard. Story 78 No violent media shows, video games, etc., and all MPASRB ratings are taken at complete face value. What's the crazy part is my parents are very liberal in every other aspect. Gave me very good education about drugs, etc., when it was appropriate for my age of course, not religious, racist, homophobic. I spent my childhood listening to music with swear words in it and dark themes Pink Floyd The Wall for example, but I wasn't allowed to watch Teen Titans the original, not Teen Titans Go when I was 7 because it was too violent. When I was 12, I wasn't allowed to play Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess because it was rated T for fantasy violence. I wasn't allowed to play Skyrim until I was actually 17 years old and the game had been out for over 5 years, because when you hit people there is blood and they die. Story 79 Not me, but my brother's wife. She thought you couldn't go through a drive-thru if you didn't have cash. She was like 23. When my brother said let's stop at Taco Bell and she dug through her purse and said she couldn't go because she had no cash. And my brother was like, no worries, I have my card. And she said you can't use the drive-thru with a card. Story 80 We weren't allowed to dine out very often. And never ever fast food. We owned a restaurant and my dad thought that was where we should eat. My mom and I snuck out on occasion. Story 81 As always with these things, I'm amazed at how much people remember from their childhood. I'm drawing a blank most times. Like, I remember the people I grew up with, the homes we lived in vaguely, and some things I did with my friends, but mostly it's blank. I assume I had some rules growing up, but I don't remember them. One thing regarding this that I remember is actually about 2 of my friends who were brothers. I remember vividly how their mom got super bossy about them having to shake their bed sheets through the window directly after getting up Sunday morning, and they were not allowed to sleep in late. So I guess I can conclude that my parents weren't nearly as strict, since that event got ingrained in my brain as something really out of the ordinary. Story 82 That turning on the lights inside the car while driving is illegal and forbidden. This made me completely hate it afterwards when I'm driving and others do it. Story 83 Not me, but my friend's grandparents. She wanted me to come hang out there and meet them. They had a rule that you could not say the word, you had to say potty burp instead, which is infinitely more disgusting than the word. My dad said I wasn't allowed to go over there anymore because clearly something was wrong those people. Story 84 Hay race, a more wholesome one. I guess we had to finish our homework on Saturdays, so that Sunday could be a true break with no homework hanging over our heads. Story 85 If you got hurt playing outside, you had to stand in the grass and bleed, not on the sidewalk, in the grass. As an adult trying to get blood out of carpet, I now understand this rule. Story 86 The grand irony is that every current future parent on this thread will have a kid who could write equally fed up stories. It's human nature to pass down the crazy. Story 87 Both my parents had weird rules about my clothes. I wasn't allowed to wear leggings or anything that went higher than my knees, Even though my mom was Catholic, it wasn't a rule based on religion. I remember my mom calling the other 11-year-old girls in my class skank sluts for wearing clothes like that, and also saying that by dressing like that, which was a very normal way for girls my age to dress, they were asking for it. As a result, I haven't worn clothes from the women's section since I was first allowed to pick out clothes that I actually liked and felt comfortable in, which was when I was about 14. Before that I would cry every time I had to get new clothes because all of the clothes in the girls' women's section seemed like they would cause me to get hurt. Story 88. My parents were pretty relaxed. We couldn't have food in our rooms, but that's because bugs are a real concern due to being a tropical area. We also weren't allowed to have TV in our rooms. We could watch TV in the living room as much as we wanted within reason, but it wasn't allowed in our room. We weren't banned from using laptops to watch stuff when older, it was just having an actual TV. I thought it was reasonable. I couldn't live without my bedroom TV now, but it kinda makes sense for kids. I hated it when someone's parent would leave on a TV all night because I couldn't sleep until the VHS ended, because I felt weird messing with other people's electronics without permission.